research analyst at Ovum and responsible for our information security practice. Today, I want to talk about identity and access management and the need for a single point of contact for business and consumer-focused identity management. On the call, I will be joined by Rob McGregor, Product Manager from Pirean. Good afternoon, Rob.
Good afternoon.
And Rob will provide more focus on the subject at hand and give the company's perspective on the road ahead for identity and access management. As Lucy said during the call, we'll be happy to take your questions on any issues that arise during the course of the call, and we've put aside some time to answer those at the end. Okay, let's get going. Maintaining a single point of contact for business and consumer-focused identity and access management. That's the issue we're going to discuss this afternoon. And it's a subject of a number of papers on IAM that Ovum has produced both independently and along with Pirean. It's an important subject because although the IAM sector is mature and well established, there are a number of shortfalls that need to be addressed. Well, that's in my opinion anyway. If the technology and its value to business and individual users is to be sustained for the next generation of, both business users and consumers, this presentation is going to look at what can and should be done to improve things and covers what businesses and the user community as a whole should be looking for from their IAM providers. So, I wanted to start with where things stand at the moment. Identity and access management needs to deliver safe and simple access for all types of users. It should be capable of supporting the digital access and protection rights of all users. But, and for a number of reasons, many existing legacy systems will struggle to achieve some of the objectives that certainly we're going to talk about today. Okay, most enterprises have some form of IAM technology in place, even if this involves basic password security and some forms of provisioning and Active Directory controls. But this also often involves fragmented deployments, systems that were rolled out to address specific business issues. And it's this type of disjointed approach that is holding up a lot of areas where progress is required. And then if we start to think about the integration and usability requirements, you'll see many of these early day projects involve a mix of disconnected suppliers and solutions, so nothing that could be closely called integrated. As we look forward, there's not a lot of chance of these solutions will offer the integration that the modern enterprise organizations are typically talking to us about as being their requirements. Often these siloed deployments were designed specifically with business to business or business to employee focus. In many cases, they are restricted both in what they currently can do and in their ability to scale and deliver the facilities needed to address today's digital identity challenges. Perhaps for those trying to manage legacy IAM systems, none of what I've said already will come as a big surprise. But we do need to move on and do better. So the next thing I wanted to look at and discuss was the benefits of change. So let's look at benefits that can be achieved with IAM technology. And it's easy for me to say that having the ability to know and understand users and their requirements and identity business opportunities as they arise is the hallmark of a successful business. But without the supporting technology and tools to do the job, far more difficult to achieve. In the digital economy, identity and access management is one of the key drivers, and it's coming up in lots of conversations that we're having with both the subscribers to Ovum services and the vendor community. These key drivers make it possible, but only if all users see the benefits and all access channels are supportable. To achieve the technology's long-term potential, IAM must support ease of use, safe access requirements for all types of user. As I've already said, the core technology is mature, has been in use for decades, but because of cost and complexity issues, has often been restricted to sensitive operational environments where business security, data protection are paramount. Going forward, though, more and more users will be networking with business systems via, well, pretty much any available and channel and connected device. They'll require digital identity services that allow them to perform the simplest, as well as the most complex tasks without hindrance and on their own terms. Identity and access management, if delivered correctly, and that is the major caveat here, can become the driving force that makes all this possible. It has to be capable of supporting the complete user life cycle requirements of all business and consumer groups, and must deliver on future usage and capacity requirements. So, what we're seeing is an identity and access management market that needs to change, and in my opinion, is beginning to change. It has to change to meet the operational user lifecycle requirements of business organisations and the ever-widening range of users that demand access to goods and services. We have to take into account traditional business to business and business to employee requirements. We also have to take into account the extended supply chain and partner requirements and that operate alongside the wider demands of the business. We also, when we look forward, need to look at the extended requirements of consumers and citizens, and as well as the up-and-coming Internet of Things and smart city issues. As shown in the diagram, managing the complete digital life cycle is a key issue. Operational requirements start with the creation of user identities. Managing and distributing the assets of operational use, retrieving the details of ongoing activities and reuse, and preserving details and archiving as relationships mature. So the whole picture and the whole management of the users. But as we think about widening the range of digital relationships that need to be managed, we have to take into account how they will change and evolve, and how the different levels of security and control that will be needed at different times come into the picture. There are several important reasons why IAM needs to change. If you take into account all the key deliverables identified in the digital lifecycle diagram on this slide, which in this case, I must admit, has a leaning towards commercial business to consumer relationships, but also has a relevance for traditional business to business and business to employee. Usage and registration, data gathering, opportunities and user preferences, building user relationships, targeted marketing, protection requirements for initial and subsequent transactions, post-sale and subsequent opportunities. Start to build that life cycle picture of what needs to be covered, and the expectations of users for ease of access, business for better levels of control. Relying on traditional and existing platform-based identity management basically won't achieve too many of these objectives. The knowing and the understanding of all types of user and their requirements is already a fundamental business issue, but it's one that most of us would like to be able to do better and more effectively. So next generation IAM has to have the flexibility to scale and the security to deal with the digital access and protection rights of all users, and importantly, deliver these services to the users on-premise, in the cloud, and in web-based environments. What we need is a new generation of IAM systems and services that can deal with all types of users and their interactive business and consumer relationships. We should be looking for IAM systems that are capable of addressing the usage and protection needs of all types and sizes of business. And as I just said, systems that can be delivered and maintained on-premise and from the cloud. Importantly, IAM usage and protection services should be available to all organisations and user groups, and there should be facilities available to fit all budgets. IAM usability and protection is just as important to small businesses as it is to enterprise. And that is true of the complete benefits proposition that IAM represents, but certainly as it needs to represent going forward. Support for infrastructure and life cycle requirements. Okay. The types of supporting infrastructure services we need identity management to provide should be capable of handling anything from light ad hoc browsing from occasional users to the security protection of high-value privileged power users, and the types of user who have the potential to put the business, the power users, the types of user with the potential to put the business and its operations at risk also need to be protected. It must be able to manage every type of user and customer relationship, including the ability to operate within workforce and customer and citizen environments. For me, IAM does all these things quite well now, but often in bits, in silos of good practice, but rarely at the levels of scale and integration that are going to be needed. For example, at the most basic of levels, federated requirements dictate that identity management has to support the secure sharing of information between connected devices, systems and businesses. Today, many organisations struggle to do this well enough and struggle to do it beyond the very basic requirements. When we look to the future, we will need to cover far more users and devices and operational roles, and do this in an integrated fashion that supports simple, common and safe access for all. At the same time, identity management will be required to address the levels of scalability needed to support the billions of digital identities the Internet of Things and smart city environments is going to bring along. Billions more devices will and already do have IP addresses, and the information they will provide will be linked to the digital identity of their owners and the organisations who need that data. So let's consider the ongoing and future requirements. We need to be aware that before the end of the decade, people will be networking with business systems via a host of connected devices. To some extent, this is already an issue with bring your own device and multiple device usage within businesses, and is already extending out to customer relationships where online users will access commercial systems from whatever device is most convenient at any time they choose and via whatever channel, secure and insecure, that's available to them. Identity management will need to provide seamless access control facilities that allow users to perform both the simplest and, as I said before, the most complex of tasks safely. All users, whether private or business, want modes of access that are simple, easy to use and consistent. People will vote with the browser and go elsewhere if too many barriers are put in the way. Equally, when extra security is needed, they want it to just happen and make them feel safe, so that when they're doing transactions, everything happens as it should. Digital identity is the driving force that makes this possible, or rather, digital identity is the driving force that should be making all this possible. But in many cases, organisations continue to struggle to achieve their objectives today. But cannot stress this too often. Having the ability to know and understand business and private users and the requirements, and identify business opportunities as they arise, will become the hallmark of successful companies. It will help keep them ahead of the competition, and if done properly, can drive business benefits in the form of additional sales and revenue. So let's think about the bigger picture. Consumer and business values now starting to dominate future identity management thinking. No longer good enough to simply say yes or no when an access request is received. We need to know more about the users, their mode of access, the information they want, where they're coming from, what they're likely to do once access has been granted. Then there are the business issues, especially where business to consumer relationships are involved. Organisations should be looking to build on customer relationships and identify new sales and business opportunities. That in itself implies that IAM will no longer operate just as a security tool in isolation. We need to consider how far the IAM, the identity and access management meets customer relationship management should travel. But even before all that, we need to improve business to user relationships, how they're managed, and how it's still far too often the case that security-based systems such as identity management are retained as a simple stop and block mechanism. Digital consumers ought to be treated fairly wherever possible. Wherever possible, interactions need to be simplified, and where possible, the use of multiple identities cut down and even eradicated. One of the big issues at the moment revolves around multiple identities. The multiple identities we all have, and how within one organisation we can be known in different ways. With many organisations, they just don't have the joined up systems needed to make the necessary connections. This is a continuing problem. So, what organisations and the customers need and want and should be demanding? In summary, all users want easy, open facilities that are easy to use, safe at the point of use, and can step up with stronger security controls. Identity management systems have to deal with every type of business and private relationship. We need technology that recognises and supports businesses and their users as individuals. Basically, if you can't fully identify each user, it's difficult to deal effectively with the requirements. So as competition for new business and the need to retain customers intensifies, organisations will need to deploy IAM's identity management solutions that are consistent, easy to use, and don't put unnecessarily barriers in the way of doing business. It's my contention that IAM has the Identity and Access Management has the ability to offer technology services that businesses can't afford to ignore, and we need to give consideration to what these services will look like in the future and how we will get there from where we are now. Ovum research shows that we already spend more than 20% of our software security budgets on identity management technology. This figure isn't going to go down because of all the extra requirements of the technology going forward. There are a number of existing facilities within identity management that will come along for the journey because they're important to how the service is delivered. So, for example, authentication services will need to evolve to become more risk-based, adaptive, and context-led. It's easy to say that authentication services need to be more flexible and intuitive, but what do we really mean? Well, consumers of low-risk products and services should be able to go about their online tasks without interference, because by this stage we should know what level of access they will need. It shouldn't be beyond our ability to hold back on unnecessary security controls until they're absolutely needed. At the point of need, for example, when undertaking financial transactions or requesting access to high-risk areas of the business, that's the time when the security needs to kick in. Identity management and its authentication services need to deliver a better balance between the need for simpler access and the point at which security controls need to take over. Single sign-on is a key issue going forward. It's needed for managing credentials. It's the tool that allows people to move about their business systems in an uninterrupted way. It's the vital link that enables users to move between business systems, and as long as the correct security levels are maintained, single sign-on has an important role to play. Normally, and unless something fundamentally changes once signed-in credentials can be retained and should be there to deliver the services, which means that at least in some ways, single sign-on is that key deliverable, but it's also an area that a lot of organisations continue to struggle to deliver. Federated single sign-on adds to the requirements so that relationships beyond the enterprise can be supported. It's important for business to business, business to employee, and business to consumer relationships, and it's there to deliver a level of service. It supports a seamless movement between related systems, and will be a key deliverable as we go forward. Provisioning and deprovisioning services are there to ensure that the right people get access to the right levels of service, but as identified here, it's also important to ensure that they're available to remove access rights when people's relationships with the business change. Going forward, it's going to become more important to look at the monitoring side and the analysis side of identity management, the benefits of monitoring, reporting and audit. Organisations will need to know more about what their users are doing, the business opportunity side that can be generated, and from the security and compliance side, they need to know more about normal and unusual usage patterns in order to detect risky activity and data theft. They're there to support the business opportunity, engagements with organisations, and the need to monitor and control will become a bigger issue as identity access management goes forward. So, in summary, when looking for an IAM provider capable of building business, consumer and citizen relationships and supporting new sales and relationship opportunities, a combination of user and business requirements dominate our thinking. Identity management providers have to deliver value and control across all operational areas. Beyond the privilege management environment, there is little point in specialization or in limiting coverage to the limited business to business and business to employee relationships that exist today. Technology solutions will need to have a range of capabilities and scale. There will be more users, more devices, and digital identities that need to be safely supported and maintained. The overriding need will be for an IAM for identity management technology that can support the usage and security demands of all user groups and deliver services to and from the cloud. They will need to provide support for all channels of access, support for all mobile devices that users are likely to use, and deliver services on-premise or from the cloud for all types of users and all businesses and for all budgets. Now, thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm going to hand over to Rob.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Hello again. Andy has sort of gone through the expected requirements for identity and access management going into the future. The remainder of the presentation is I'm going to talk about how Pirean and our Access One product can deliver on those requirements and take a look at how our product function can meet the challenges that Andy's given us. So to move forward to the next slide, please.
Just bear with me a sec. Rob, sorry about that.
Okay. So first of all, I'll just tell you a little bit about Pirean if you're not familiar with the company. Next one, please. Thank you. So as a company, we've been going now for 14 years, which is actually a ripe old age in this business. And over that time, we've produced a number of client deployments, client solutions for some of the big, larger companies, some Fortune 500 type deployments, primarily in the UK. We have a set of very highly skilled security professionals who have been working on these projects and have got years and years of experience in the identity and access management space. And as the slide says, we've been recognized by various organizations over the years, Gartner, but also with IBM, who we have a long-standing business relationship as a partner. Sorry, next one, please. So as a group, we're slightly unusual in that we're not purely a software business. So we started out life primarily as a professional services organization, and as part of that remit, we found ourselves wanting to write software that helped to link together different identity and access management products and solutions, and to orchestrate the way that they worked. So about 5 years ago, we set up a software development business as part of the company, part of the group, and that's where Access One, our key application, has come from. In addition, we don't like to leave our customers with a solution that then falls into disuse, which is always a risk with something as complicated as some of the identity access management scenarios that we've seen. And for that purpose, we have a solution assured business, which is providing third level or second level support to our customers to help them develop their solutions, move things forward as new challenges and new requirements come around, and also allows us to continue to provide support for defects and issues as they arise. Next one, please. So the next few slides are going to introduce Access One, which is our platform for identity and access management, and look at how it provides a solution across the whole spectrum of different scenarios, from consumer through to workforce security and business to business. Next, please. Thank you. So what do we mean by, so what's the difference between these different ends of the spectrum? Clearly, there is a difference because the workforce solution and the consumer solution have traditionally been very different and really have had no commonality between them at all. However, what we're finding is that as time goes by, it's becoming increasingly important to, or there's increasing commonality between those requirements. So we view it from the workforce side. It's all about the user lifecycle, creating, so joiners, movers, leavers, creating users, managing them, assigning roles and removing them, and then, very importantly, the ability to turn users off, to hit the big red switch when somebody leaves the organization. We also need to think about governance and legislation that goes with that, and the ability to run certifications and recertifications of access. And increasingly, from the workforce side, we're seeing the requirement for cloud enablement, so that support for applications that are hosted in the cloud, which every one of our customers has got as their current main way of doing business. But equally, we have to look at Access One, so providing a service in a cloud-hosted way. So identity management as a service, which we also provide. From the consumer end, well, that's all about producing something that's low friction, meaning that we can bring users on board rapidly and with the least impact to them. So if, for example, we were looking at an online retail site, we don't want to be requesting extraneous information. We don't want to be requesting too much information. In fact, we don't want any information from our customer necessarily until the point at which they're committed to buying something or pursuing something further. So it's a very low friction way of working. Self-service is key, and the only way that you can support the volumes that are there, and it needs to be scalable. But both of those ends of the spectrum have common things as well. So the whole focus on cost of service, again, coming down to self-service, the ability to provision people with accounts when they need them, so be timely about them. You need to do that with a great user experience, so users are not going to put up with the kind of interfaces that in the past have been used for workforce management, particularly for things like approvals and request processes. We need seamless integration, and that includes single sign-on across multiple applications, both on-premise and within the cloud. And we need to make sure that any user journeys that we're producing are integrated with the business processes that need to hook into them. And then finally, mobile awareness. So we need things that are usable from a mobile point of view, not only to do with form factor, but also to do with where those devices are hosted, and to be able to then use that information and use that device both as a benefit from the identity management point of view, so it's a way of identifying the user, but also to view it as a potential attack point, and therefore to be able to control when that is used and to be able to turn it off as required. Go to the next one, please. Thank you. So we, with Access One, we've implemented across all of these different patterns. So from consumer and customer citizen-oriented IAM, we've provided solutions for major supermarkets, for financial institutions and insurance companies for their customer-facing services. We provided enterprise security services for large enterprises. So, for example, adding things like a comprehensive password recovery system to take load off of a overloaded help desk for a major oil company, as an example where Access One's been used. And then from the workforce IAM side, we've provided standard user lifecycle capability tied in with single sign-on and all wrapped up with some with powerful and compelling user interfaces. Because the user interface is actually something that we see as a very key part of the story. So when you're delivering a service, and obviously what we're interested in here is the user's first experience of the system. Very often it's the login page or the registration page or the how do I do this page. It's very important that we have the depth of functionality, but it's also important that that service is usable, is accessible, it supports different requirements and different languages, that kind of thing. So somewhere in the middle of those two circles, of the how things feel and how things function, there is a happy point where we get a properly engaged user. So this is somebody who not only wants to get into the system, but also wants to engage with it and make sure that they set up their account in the appropriate way. So you're empowering the user to make use of the identity management system for their own benefits. Next, please. So I'm going to move on as we don't have that much time. This page simply shows some examples of where Access One has been used. So you can sort of view it as additional information to support the idea that identity access management across the whole spectrum, from customer facing through to the workforce enablement, is beginning to look more and more similar as time goes by. Next, please. So how do we do this? So what is it about Access One that allows us to have this scope and this flexibility? The way that we have designed the application is as a layered model, where at the top we have two interfaces, a RESTful interface to allow applications to interface to the identity management system and to allow deep integration with business systems, and the browser dialogue, the browser interface, which allows us to produce a compelling and functionally rich set of dialogues for the end user. Backing up both of those interfaces is an orchestration engine, and the orchestration engine's job is to build the dialogues and the processes that our customer needs for their identity access management process. So whether that be initiating a single sign-on request, registering a new user, going through some kind of role management process, so assigning or removing roles and generating the downstream effects of that, all of that can be implemented using our orchestration engine and by using standard plugins in different and exciting ways. And those plugins are very simple pieces of code that talk to different types of interface, whether they be directories for data storage, databases for auditing and lookup, different types of authentication source, so things like Google Authenticator or password access, that kind of thing, or indeed other cloud providers, so produced or generating accounts in, for example, Office 365, and then setting up their roles and capabilities. Next, please. So how do we put that together? Well, a typical Access One implementation will be using Access One as an orchestrator of a number of different processes. So going from the right, we have single sign-on, usually through SAML, but we have other single sign-on capabilities, and we're going to a variety of different target applications, whether they be on the cloud or within the customer's on-premise network. We also have the ability to use proxy servers where we have applications that don't conform to standards. So it's very important that we don't simply focus on the new stuff and leave things which maybe not the most recent and maybe don't follow standards, but we still need to provide some way to do single sign-on to them. We also will be talking to different user registries, both from the point of view of provisioning accounts into them and from the point of view of absorbing information from them, so reading user data and other information from those systems. From an application point of view, we have a two-way kind of thing going on. So again, we're provisioning accounts and managing them, and we can do this either on-premise or in the cloud, and we have a connector which allows us to execute things on-premise from our identity as a service solution. But also, we are increasingly seeing the idea of identity as a service for other applications to consume. So the applications that will be able to both read and write to the identity store based on the business process that the user may be going through. And that's particularly important in a consumer-facing world. And all of this is brought together through a set of dialogues on our single sign-on launch panel, which we call WebTop, and which is a functionally rich user interface which allows the user not only to access their applications through single sign-on capabilities, but also to manage their accounts, so to do self-service operations on their account information, to request access and to approve it if they're designated as an approver, and to manage their devices, so to pair mobile devices with their account and to set up trusted relationships. Next, please. Just to give a better picture of WebTop and the kind of dialogues that you see in it, we have a set of screenshots here from WebTop and from our mobile applications that fit in with it. And you can see that we have the Launchpad, so going from top left, anti-clockwise, left, the Launchpad, the self-service and preferences management, where a user can manage their own account and their preferences for things like communications and authentication. For example, being able to use non-password authentication for certain services, or indeed setting up second-factor authentication for services where that's required for security reasons. We have messaging built in, so that when you generate a request to do something, it will pop up as a message on the approver's device. We have a password self-care function built into this, We have the opportunity for strong authentication. We have tools for help desk and other administrators to manage users and to help them. But as I said before, what we're trying to do is limit that to make, wherever possible, self-help to be the way to go. Management of devices, management of access requests, and team management. So that's where a manager can log in and see the state of the access accounts of their employees, approve requests if needed, add roles and rights to those users so that they manage their entitlements for them, and indeed actually lock a user out if, for whatever reason, they've maybe left the company in a hurry. So it's empowering the administrator or the manager in this case, empowering that manager with the ability to look after their own users, to expedite requests and processes without having to go through long-winded request processes, and indeed to audit and maintain the state of their users' access rights. Next, please. So, just for a change of scene, this is the same set of configurations, but in this case with a consumer twist. So we see the same kind of processes here. We've got a completely different look and feel. We no longer have the webtop launchpad, but we still have the same set of processes. It's just this is for a consumer type organization rather than for workforce. So, for example, the help desk services in this case would include things like ID&V processes to allow a help desk user to identify the person at the end of a phone to continue with their request. Next, please. Thank you. So, looking at so that was, if you like, our standard mode of operation. So that's Access One as the core of a process for managing accounts, provisioning them, maintaining them, removing them, single sign-on, and the whole request response process that wraps around that set of activities and life cycle. But as I said earlier, we're also seeing a lot of cases where our customers are looking to exploit the identity service as something that has benefit to the business. And this is particularly the case where there are silos of users. So quite a lot of organizations, large organizations, have been built up based on mergers and acquisitions and end up with a variety of different online applications, each with their own identity setup and identity lifecycle processes. So what we can offer here is an API, an interface that those online applications can consume. We use the OAuth protocol to securely identify the user on the online application without that application having to handle passwords and account lifecycle. So that application gets a token which it can then use to request services from the identity service, from Access One, and to manage that account. So that's a very powerful capability, for example, to allow other applications to make use of a user base from, for example, an online shopping application, that kind of thing. The other side of that is, the other side of that, publish identity events from that system, which can then be consumed by a subscriber. So that could be customer relationships management, it could be other internal applications, it could be to do with auditing and digital protection. But what it allows us to do is to flag and to generate a process when, for example, an account is locked out, or when a new user appears, or maybe when one of our customers registers a new postal address. Maybe we need to update a number of downstream applications as a result of that. So it's making use of that identity information that is present in the environment but has not necessarily been available for all application environments to support, to consume. Yes, next please. And then finally, you may think that, from what I've been saying, that Access One does absolutely everything. Well, no, we accept that we don't cover every single identity and access requirement, but we do have relationships with other companies who do provide identity and access solutions, in particularly things like different kinds of authentication mechanisms and identity governance systems for recertification and for the things like separation of duties processing, role mining, that kind of thing. And also increasingly now things like mobile device management platforms where a company is trying to manage the devices that are used by their workers, whether those devices are bring your own device or whether they've been provided by the company, or kind of doesn't matter. In either case, there are risks involved in that, and there's management that needs to be applied. So where Access One fits into this is we have our launch panel, we have our great user experience that gives you, and we can integrate into that the capabilities of these other services by synchronization routines, so that the accounts and user and device definitions that those services know about are actually available within the Access One web-top desktop. So I hope that has given you a rapid overview of what Access One is, who Pirean are, and what we are offering and where we're going with identity and access management. It's a never-changing story, ever-changing story, and we're very excited about some of the new things that we're working on in this area. So at that point, if you could move the slide on one more. Thank you very much for attending, and I guess we can handle questions if there are any.
Yes, thanks, Rob. That was great. I think we've got time for just a couple of questions as we move towards the time allotted to us. And what I'd like to start with is one that's relevant to some of the things that you were covering there. Why is it becoming so important to address the identity management requirements of all users from within a single solution? So I guess the integration issues.
Yeah, I think there are lots of reasons why that's an important thing. The main one, I think, is that the lines between consumers and employees and partners for many organizations are becoming increasingly blurred. So there are definitely common requirements across all of those different areas, and increasingly we're finding that the same set of services and set of presentation approaches works in multiple different ways. So I think it's really a result of the way that the World Wide Web and the way that people are increasingly living online lives is impinging on the world of work, maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think some of the issues are in and around the expectations of users today. So when you think about the way that the new generation of workers has grown up with online access capabilities and expectations that are very much focused towards the consumer ability to use online services. When they get into the business environment, I guess their expectations are higher than perhaps mine and yours were in previous generations.
You're calling me old. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what's clear about that is that it's the whole, you need this thing now, and it makes sense. It makes absolute sense that decisions and updates should be done not just in a timely fashion, but as rapidly as possible, because time spent being unable to do your job is time wasted. But equally, time spent with someone who's disgruntled and is maybe just about to storm out the door, you want to lock that account down very rapidly too. So there are lots of good reasons why the kind of speed of access and speed of response that you get in the consumer world is appearing in the workforce area now as well.
So I guess it comes back to some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of getting that balance right between ease of access and getting the right level of security there for all users at the point when it's needed.
Yes.
So along those similar lines, thinking about the consumer side of things and the impact that a growing number of consumers, and indeed extending that out to consumer technologies such as the Internet of Things. The next question I've got passed to me is, how does Pirean go about addressing the scalabilities issues that will be needed to support both the business to consumer environment and Internet of Things going forward?
So that comes down to really two things. One is to make sure that we design our applications to be lightweight and performant from the word go, and we've been relatively successful with that. We're looking at user populations in the millions, so 6 to 8 million is our highest so far. So that whole concept, that whole sort of part of the software is something that we're fairly happy with. But what is increasingly important is the ability to scale on demand. And with our identity management as a service offering, where we're going with that is the ability to spin up new nodes and to make sessions as basically non-persistent as possible. So to allow us to add resource very, very rapidly without the end user noticing. So it's and that comes down to a lot of sort of new technologies in the area of continuous integration and support for containerized services, which is very much the way that not just our software, but a lot of software is developing at the moment. So there are quite a lot of pointers there, not just in the area of identity and access, but across the world of software, where many, I think many people are trying to face up to this issue of being able to handle mushrooming demand, and equally to be able to scale down demand when it turns off again.
Right, so the opportunity for delivering both on-premise and identity as management as a service as we go forward.
Yes, I think the as a service brings some advantages from the point of view of the of scalability, undoubtedly for the customer.
Okay, thanks. Perhaps just one final question then before we finish. And it's along similar sorts of lines. The need for organisations to know more about their users has been discussed by both you and myself. So the question is, how does the Pirean solution help achieve the objective of knowing more about the users, both from a business side and from the security side of protecting the business?
Okay, so from the business side, our approach is that we should only ask for the information that we need at the time that we need it. And generally speaking, what you end up there is a customer or a consumer who is more likely to remain engaged and who is probably more willing to share with you. So it's in terms of capturing information, it's less a question of being too much in their face and more a question of picking things up almost by stealth. Don't want to sound like we're selling virusware here, but it's that kind of thing. It's the ability to learn from what the user has done before. From a security point of view, it's increasingly becoming the case that the session context and the context of the user's interactions is becoming very key. So it's not just a question of have you logged in with username and password or whatever. It's also what else do we know about that session. So have we done blacklist checking against your IP address? Do we have geographical information which might mean that we have to apply stricter authentication controls? Things like geodynamics. So has someone made an unfeasibly large journey in the last 10 minutes? Those kind of controls, which for your genuine average user will make their life easier and less friction, with less friction, but also allows you to pick out the errant and the attacker because they don't quite match their patterns. So I wouldn't say that we've got those answers yet, but I think that's one of the areas that we're doing a lot of work on to try to enhance our product and in the area of risk-based and context-based authorization.
Thanks very much, Rob. Unfortunately, I'm sure we could go on for some considerable time longer if we had it available to us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so at this stage I would like to thank Rob. I would like to thank you all for dialing in and listening to today's webinar, and thank you for taking the time to share your afternoon with us. And just say thank you all and goodbye for now.